because there's more people. There's more people coming in, which is also good. There's more people. We're changing the way that we eat, but also we need more crops because sometimes we use the crops not just for food, but for other things. So we're changing what we eat, we're changing the way we eat, and we're changing the way in which we use food. So the challenge for us as a whole population is really that we need to find ways in order to make sure that there's enough food for everyone today, tomorrow, and forever, right? So the question is, how do we do that? How do we find a way to make food so that there's enough food for you, for me, for everybody, for all of those bits and pieces that I showed you on that first slide? And the answer to that is really that modern agriculture is key to making sure that there's enough food for everybody. And what does modern agriculture look like? To me, it looks like this. So this is a very beautiful field of wheat that's not too far from my lab. And what you can see is just a lot of wheat. Now, wheat is really, really important because it goes into a lot of things. Pie, somebody mentioned the pie. So wheat is important for a lot of the foods that I cook and probably a lot of the foods that you guys eat. Unfortunately, the wheat was not important for the ice cream, so the ice cream didn't make it onto my slide. But at any rate, wheat is really important. And the nice thing about that is then, okay, fine. So we need modern agriculture. Modern agriculture is going to be important. Come on in. Modern agriculture, but how do we make modern agriculture the best that it can be? This is really the bigger question rather than how do we make enough food. So, in my opinion, again, we're moving through the slides, how do we then make sure that modern agriculture does everything that it can do? Well, what we do is we understand what it is that plants need to make us food. Come on in, have a seat. We try and investigate what it is that plants need so that they can make all of the food that we need. Okay? So, how do we do that? Well, at Rothamsted, modeling the t-shirt, at Rothamsted, we are one of the world's oldest agricultural research institutes in the world. So this is a picture that I'm showing you here of Rothamsted. What you can see in the trace around the outside, that white line, that is what Rothamsted is. And at Rothamsted, we investigate what plants need so that they can make us food. This is pretty cool because it has not only my lab down in the bottom of the edge, but it also, we've got lots of fields of wheat, which is where I took that picture of modern agriculture. So at Rothamsted, we're investigating what it is that plants need to make us food so that we can better answer the question of how do we make sure that modern agriculture is the best that it can be today, tomorrow, and in the future. So, at Rothamsted, we work a lot on wheat. Wheat, as I said, is in a lot of the products that I cook, but also wheat is really super important for the UK agriculture. Britain is really, really good at making wheat. So, in order to demonstrate how good Britain is at making wheat, what I'd like you all to do is if you could all stand up for me. Excellent. Now, this will mostly work because you guys are in rows of 4. But now, all of you standing up right now, you are all the total landmass of the UK. Have a look around. You are the total landmass of the UK. Okay. Now, what I would like you guys to do is you represent 2.24 million hectares. Which doesn't really mean a lot to me. Probably doesn't mean a lot to you either. But we're going to represent you guys as the entire landmass of the UK. Right. Excellent. Good timing. So, now, what I'd like you to do is if you're in this line, and if you're in, oh, there's nobody here. Thank you. Excellent. Come on in. I need some more people. Can you come on in and stand in here? So what I'd like you guys to do is you guys are all the total landmass of the UK. Now, one of you, please sit down. If you're in this line, excellent. Come on in. Now, what I need you guys to do is I need everybody to stand up except for if you're sitting in this line. Excellent. Now, you guys are the total landmass of Britain. Now, the people who are sitting down, you guys are all the stuff that isn't agricultural land, okay? The rest of you standing right now, it's okay, you can do whatever you'd like. The rest of you that are standing, you guys are all the agricultural land that's in the UK. Excellent. Now, anybody who's in these sections, and you guys over here, can you guys raise both your hands? Awesome. Now, anybody who's in this row, and anybody who is in this row, please put your hands down. Now, the rest of you with your hands up, you guys are the total agricultural area that's devoted to making cereals. That's pretty impressive. If you guys look around, that's a lot of cereals. Excellent. If you've got both your hands up, please put one hand on your head. Now, the hand that's raised is the bit that's devoted to making wheat. That's still quite a lot, but I'm not here to talk to you about wheat, am I? I'm here to talk to you about weeds. Now, would you please, if you're sitting on the outside row, cross your arms across your chest. Oh, there's not many hands raised left, is there? Now you guys all together are, anybody that's sitting, you are the cities and the rivers and the things that aren't agricultural land. Anybody that's standing, you guys are agricultural land. If you've got your hands up, you are wheat. If your hands are crossed across your chest, you are the bit of wheat that's been lost to weeds. That's pretty impressive, isn't it? Have a look around. Thank you very much. You can all sit back down. Excellent. So hopefully I've showed to you that actually wheat is really important to the UK, and also that weeds cause significant problems and losses of wheat, right? So I'm showing you a graph here. That's the amount of crop that we can produce. That's the amount of grain per unit hectare. And along the bottom is a measure of wheat abundance. More weeds, less wheat. That's not really good, is it? What we want, so if you were standing up and you had to cross your arms across your chest, that was 50% yield loss. That happens here. But actually, it can go up to 70% yield loss, which is pretty massive. That would be everybody sitting down except for just this little tiny corridor right here. So that's pretty impressive, isn't it? So if there's more weeds, there's less wheat. If there's less wheat, there's less pie. So that's what I think about. But really, so I've been talking to you about weeds in general. I'm going to now introduce you to my very favorite weed, and this is blackgrass. So blackgrass is the little bits that you can see the heads are just sticking up above the crop. And it's called blackgrass not because it's black in color, but because the base of the stem has a little bit of a purple coloring, and the heads, when they flower, are actually a nice, really purple color. So that's why it's called blackgrass. Because when you're driving across and you're looking out over the fields, sometimes there's a little bit of a black haze above the wheat. Now, blackgrass is a serious problem in the UK. All of these counties that I've colored here in orange are all places where blackgrass is growing and causing problems. It's not only the UK problem, but it's also all over Western Europe as well. Any of the ones in the red. So there's a definite decrease in the amount of wheat if you have an increase in the amount of blackgrass. So, but why can't we get rid of this? Why isn't modern agriculture able to keep up with this weed? This is one of the major questions that I'm trying to address. So, one of the things, the keys to understanding modern agriculture is that actually we rely a lot on herbicides. So herbicides are chemicals that are designed specifically to target weeds, and what they do is they kill weeds, which is good, because what we want is we want only wheat. We don't want weeds and wheat, because remember, more weeds equal less pie. So herbicides are things that are designed to kill just specifically to target and kill weeds, but blackgrass has a superpower. It's able to survive herbicides, so it has herbicide resistance. And this means that it helps it to thrive and survive in our modern agriculture. So, excuse me. Blackgrass, herbicide resistance in blackgrass is a huge problem. We're talking about 0.4 billion pounds of lost income to farmers and 820,000 tons of wheat, which again, those numbers don't mean anything to me. They probably don't mean anything to you guys either. But again, I do know things about bread. I like bread. And if we convert this into loaves of bread, and we talk about something that's a little bit easier to understand, then if we talk about the entire population of Birmingham, which is the UK's second largest city, Birmingham has a population of 1.14 million people. So if you take those 1.2 billion loaves of bread, you divide them up on those 1.14 million people, divided over a year, that's 3 loaves of bread per person per day for the entire population of Birmingham. That's a big deal. So that's the scale. So in addition to what I showed you there, where you had your hands crossed across your chest, now it's 3 loaves of bread per person per day for the city of Birmingham. So now that we've really hammered home the fact that blackgrass is bad, it reduces our wheat, less wheat equals less pie, what we can talk about is how do we control this? So if herbicides aren't working, what am I doing to try and understand better how we control this weed? Because clearly everybody in Birmingham wants another 3 loaves of bread per person per day. And so what I'm doing is I'm trying to understand the biology of the survivors. What is it that enables them? What are their superpowers? How do they survive what's going on in the background? And so that's where I started, right? So here are all the pictures that I started with, the big slide of wonderful different versions of how I'm investigating what blackgrass does and how it survives in the different ways. And really what I am doing is I'm taking the blackgrass from the field, I'm bringing it into my glass houses, I'm bringing it into my lab, and I'm taking really close-up looks as to what biology is happening in those plants so that we can figure out what their superpowers are, so that we can figure out what their kryptonite is. How do we kill them? How do we control them? And how do we work on them? So I mentioned to you that blackgrass has herbicide resistance, and actually it's not as simple as dead, not dead. I was really disappointed when I found out that it's a little bit more complicated than that. They don't just die, they die on a scale, and here I'm showing you different colors that represent whether or not they can survive herbicides or not. So what my colleagues did is they got into their cars and they drove all over the UK and they collected blackgrass samples from all over the eastern part of England, and they brought those samples back and they assessed whether or not the level of herbicide resistance that they had. And what you can see is that there's some populations that are blue, and those are ones that are not resistant and they die when you spray them with herbicides. But some populations down here are red, and no matter what you spray them with, they will survive. So this is really useful because we can start to investigate why. What are the differences between these two populations? How are they biologically different? How are they relevant? What's going on inside of them that allows them to either live or die under these conditions? This is also great because we can bring this information back to the farmers and explain to them, in your field is this resistant compared to that resistant, you have this level, and this is information that we can then directly pass on to make sure that the data is getting back to the farmers in their own fields. Now, the other thing that I'm working on is actually trying to investigate the biology of the plants themselves. So for me, I'm really a plant biologist. I'm not an herbicide person. I don't even go out into the field that often. I'm more in the lab, so this is much more where I'm comfortable and trying to deal with. And so what I'm doing is I'm asking, how do these plants grow? What are the different transitions that they have? And how much seed do they produce in order to understand that cycle of going on? So I'm showing you 3 graphs here. You've got a fast one in orange, a medium one in blue, and a very slow one in gray. And that's really important for us to know that some of the plants are growing faster than others. This again helps farmers to target their chemical controls and their cultural controls in the appropriate ways. The plant also has to transition to flowering, and when you make flowers, how many flowers are there? How many heads? How tall are they? Some of them are quite tall and they'll be easy to deal with and see. Some are quite short and they'll be under the canopy. And if you have predominantly short ones, you'll not be able to actually even see what's happening. So the plants then produce seed, but they're not all viable. So how many are viable? That will help us to determine what the next generation is. And also, how many of those are going to grow on and grow to become real plants in the future? All of these bits of data together help us to understand what the plant is doing in my lab so that we can then correlate that to what's happening in the field so that we can then make predictions about how much is going on. But I started off this by saying I'm a molecular biologist. And I also said that mostly I'm in the lab grinding up plants and figuring out what's going on. Now, with molecular biology, really what we're interested in is trying to figure out what's the DNA, what's the RNA, and what are the proteins. Now, I happen to have noticed that there's a couple of stands just over the way where they're extracting DNA from either strawberries or from blueberries. So if you guys want to learn more about DNA, there's a couple of stands just over that way that will help you to figure that out. But really what I want to do is, this is me actually extracting some DNA from my own plants, and we basically use the same processes that they were using, except that I get to use liquid nitrogen, which is much more fun. So I'm really a geneticist, and what I'd love to be able to do is figure out what I can add or take away from the plants in order to make them change. So here are some plants that I'm showing you where I've taken away one gene that's really important for making chlorophyll biosynthesis. Chlorophyll is the reason that plants are green, and so hopefully what you can see is that these plants are white and stripy. That's pretty cool. I've been able to make plants that were green white by taking away one single gene. The ones on the other side are much more cool. What I've done is I've taken plants and I've added in green fluorescent proteins so that they glow. I made glowing weeds, which is awesome. So if you look at these under a UV light with special glasses, what you can see is they actually do glow. That was pretty fun. Now, who of you would like to have some glowing or some stripy blackgrass? Just one person? Oh, okay, a few people. Good. Unfortunately, I can't give you any. I would, but these I have to keep in the lab because they have been modified. I have to grow everything in the lab. But it's really, really useful because it allows me to figure out what changes I can make so that I can figure out how the herbicides are affecting it and how the plants change. So here's some pictures that are a little bit less colorful but more interesting, where the plants in the front are clearly dead and the plants in the back are clearly alive. What I've done here is I've done just a single change where I've taken away one gene or I've added in another gene. And what you see is that this is working back to understanding where the herbicide resistance is. And if I can change those herbicide resistant genes and I spray them in the lab, then I can have dead plants or live plants. There's a lot that you can learn about dead versus alive plants. And this allows us to figure out what are the genetics that underpin that herbicide resistance in the plants. So I started off by telling you that I'm going out to the field and understanding blackgrass, how it is and where it is, bringing those plants into the glasshouse, testing how they behave, figuring out what their biology is. And then I'm taking a really up close look at these plants in order to figure out exactly what they're doing and why they're doing it. So all of these things together, I'm asking lots and lots of questions about how and why and where and how much, with whom, against whom, these sorts of questions that we can then ask. By knowing the biology, that's the beginning basis of how this works. So the questions that I'm really asking are, I want to try and understand these weeds so that we can control them better. Remember, less blackgrass equals more pie. That's always a good solution. Cake, pie, whatever it is, breakfast cereal, even all of these things are dependent on us having less weeds in our fields. So I have a huge number of projects that I'm working on trying to understand this from a variety of different tactics. Basically taking and asking, how is it happening in the field? How is it happening in the lab? And then going backwards in a couple of circles. So the questions all together leave these sorts of pictures that I showed you within the beginning. So hopefully you will have recognized some of these photos from the start. They have been throughout the presentation. And actually what I'd like to do is just say thank you at this point and remind you that I'm Dana Macgregor. I work at Rothamsted Research. And today what I've been telling you about is how understanding the biology of weeds, which are nature's super survivors, allows us to understand how to control them better. Knowledge is power, and by gaining knowledge of the biology of these plants, we can then gain control power over them. I have left some time for questions, so if you guys have any questions, please do feel free to come up and ask me.
Oh, sorry, no. Oh, right.
You can just come up and talk to me too. That's okay. But hopefully that was good. Do you guys now have a better understanding of how much wheat is produced in the UK and why we need less blackgrass in our fields? Now what I should do is go back to the food because that's really the important part, right? But yeah, no, I'm happy to answer any questions that you guys have. Yes?
Do you think there's a time where your work and your research will actually eradicate that particular weed? Is that an option?
I think there's a time when blackgrass will be eradicated from agricultural fields, right? So we don't want to get rid of blackgrass everywhere. What we want to do is we just don't want it in our wheat fields. And just like we don't want an oak tree in the middle of our wheat field, or just like we don't want all sorts of other plants in the middle of our wheat fields, blackgrass is particularly bad. I hope that what we can do is we can figure out ways to make cultural controls, chemical controls work so that the farmers end up with just wheat, and just wheat equals more pie. So it's that sort of a cycle that I'm looking for. I'm not looking to eradicate blackgrass because actually blackgrass is a really cool plant. It's kind of something I love a little bit. So for me, I don't want to get rid of blackgrass. I just don't want it growing in my field. Just like you don't want a lot of dandelions in your garden. Dandelions are awesome, really cool plants. We don't want them in our gardens. We want them out somewhere else in their sort of more natural setting.